If you publish a video, YouTube is doing its very best job to push that video to people who want to see your video. And so if you think of it as like audiences, like, little groups of people that YouTube's pushing it to, well, if your channel is really small, your core audience is going to be very small, and they probably come to your channel for a very specific type of thing. So anytime you push out a video that is outside of that very specific thing, automatically the first audience that YouTube is ever going to show your video to isn't going to quite know what to do with it because it's different than what you normally make. Test audience number 1, fail, because it's not the same thing. So then YouTube says, okay, well, maybe it was just a little bit different. I'll try it with someone else. Okay, well, what if it fails again? How many times is YouTube actually going to try and push out your content to new little groups of audiences until they just stop? I think that we do ourselves an injustice by just going wild across topics on our channels, even if it's stuff that we're interested in or passionate about. By really honing in on a specific type of video or style of video, it just helps YouTube figure out who your audience is and who should see your videos.
Welcome back to the Creative Files podcast. We have here 5 common mistakes that hinder your YouTube growth from courtesy of Nathan. Tell us where you got these.
Prodvigate.com.
Very credible source.
Number 1 or number 2 ranked on Google for the question, 5 common mistakes that YouTubers make.
So there you have it.
I'm very interested to see. I actually have not read through any of these mistakes yet. So I think I'm very interested to know, number 1, what are the mistakes? Number 2, I was doing 2 already. Number 2, do we actually agree with them? So,
yeah. We thought it'd be fun to just kind of go through and kind of look at these with a critical eye.
Yeah. Like I was just telling Julie, I think right before we started recording, I'm not even sure who wrote this. So I'm very curious to see if we agree with, these are actually the top 5 mistakes that are going to hurt your YouTube channel growth. Yeah. So I jump in with mistake number 1.
One of the most common mistakes is when creators consider success on YouTube all about luck and completely random. Unfortunately, most of those who sincerely believe this have never really tried to work on their content to its full potential. Do not be disheartened if you fell into this way of thinking in the past. Obviously.
Number 1 mistake for hindering your growth is thinking it's just about luck.
I mean, I see that sometimes. People put too much weight on the algorithm for sure.
Yes. I think that to me, what I get from this is the lack of taking responsibility for your channel and your content.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, YouTube hates me. They don't want to show my content or anything like that. I hear that a lot. Like when I'm reading through comments on YouTube channels and stuff from other YouTube creators, I hear that all the time, that people say that. I think that's probably a big one.
Yeah. This might be an exaggeration to say people who think YouTube is all about luck and completely random. I don't know if very many people think it's completely random. A little ridiculous, but
yeah. So let's maybe we can just talk a second. Why do you think there are so many people who just put it up, wishing the YouTube gods would give them more views, but saying, "Oh, I'm doing my best"? Like, honestly, from a strategic or critical standpoint, why do you think people actually think that?
Well, put it this way: I think the people that are thinking about it the most intelligently are noticing inconsistencies or what seems like inconsistencies of why is this video doing worse? It's not any better than my other one, or it's not any better than this other video, or any worse than this other video on YouTube that's doing really well. And I've noticed some things like that with the algorithm where I thought, why is this happening?
Yeah.
So I think that's one reason. And then I think a lot of people just overestimate themselves. They think that they are better than they are. Yeah. You know, your videos might not be up to par with your taste, but they're likely more similar to your taste than anyone else's taste. You know, it's like you might not love the way your house is decorated. There might be things you'd want to change, but you probably like it more than most people do because it's tailored to your taste. So I think that's part of it. What do you think? Yeah,
I think that a lot of people, maybe they just don't quite understand how everything works. Like with the YouTube algorithm, for example, it's complicated. Nobody really understands. I don't even think that people at YouTube really understand how it works because they're changing it and then things happen that they didn't expect. It's hard when there's so much unknown and you could just say, well, you know, YouTube's just not showing me, or, you know, they're not showing my videos. It's like, okay, well, just because you don't understand how it works doesn't necessarily mean that they are against you. maybe you could try and learn a little bit better how it works. And I think there are things that we do. There's things that we teach, or we've talked about on this podcast and also on our Channel Makers YouTube channel, talking about how the YouTube algorithm does work and how, why videos are shown in certain places or how to connect one video on YouTube to another video on YouTube. Like, there are ways to improve that, but I think a lot of people either just don't quite understand how it all works, or I also agree with you that people overestimate themselves. I think that a lot of times we like to think we're a little bit better than we are. And there are also people out there who think that they're terrible. I also don't think that's helpful, but I think there are a lot of people who just go, you know what? I think this is good enough. I think I do that too. Like, if anyone went and watched some of my videos, you'd probably go, oh,
yeah,
wow. It's not that good, but for me, I might go, well, I think it's good enough, but I could just be wrong.
And honestly, the majority of people might think they're worse than they actually are. That wouldn't surprise me if most people are like even more critical of themselves than other people. I wonder if the loudest people are the ones who think that they're perfect. Like, I've seen comments before of somebody saying, I don't know why my channel isn't working. I'm doing everything right. Like, first of all, don't even have to click on your channel to tell you that's not true, because nobody's doing everything right. Second of all, click to their channel, and usually there's some pretty obvious mistakes. Yeah. So they might just be the loudest people, though. I do think you're right. I think a lot of people are very critical of themselves, and so don't overcorrect just because there are people that are not critical enough of themselves. Don't overcorrect that way. But if you are one of those people that's critical of yourself, you're probably not sitting there saying it's completely luck and the algorithm hates me.
Right. Okay, interesting mistake number one. I'm interested to hear what number 2 holds.
Number 2 is no clear purpose for your channel and content. You might argue that you have a cooking channel and it helps people learn to cook. Well, there are thousands, even tens of thousands of cooking channels. What makes yours better? Who is it specifically for? Why would it be more helpful than other channels on the same topic on the platform? If you can't find your audience, that's a sign your channel is aimless. What do you think about this?
Okay. I think that there is some value to this idea. I do think this is a big mistake a lot of people make. A lot of times, I think that the creative side of us likes to take over. And we go, well, I have an interest in this, and I want to attack this from this angle, and I want to try this new thing. And we end up making videos about things that aren't quite closely related enough. In our last kind of YouTube algorithm video that we made just a little while back on the Channel Makers channel, we talked about this and how when YouTube, if you publish a video, YouTube is doing its very best job to push that video to people who want to see your video. And so if you think of it as like audiences, like, little groups of people that YouTube's pushing it to, well, you might have your core audience, you might say. Well, if your channel is really small, your core audience is going to be very small. And they probably come to your channel for a very specific type of thing. So anytime you push out a video that is outside of that very specific thing, automatically the first audience that YouTube is ever going to show your video to isn't going to quite know what to do with it because it's different than what you normally make. So already test audience number 1, fail because it's not the same thing. So then YouTube says, okay, well, maybe it was just a little bit different. I'll try it with someone else. Okay, well, what if it fails again? How many times is YouTube actually going to try and push out your content to new little groups of audiences until they just stop and just stop testing your video totally? I think that we do ourselves an injustice by just going wild across topics on our channels, even if it's stuff that we're interested in or passionate about, by really honing in on a specific type of video or style of video or something like that. It just helps YouTube figure out who your audience is and who should see your videos. It's not to say you can't ever branch out. You want to not be niched down too far, but you don't want to be niched up too high also.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head of the niching up and niching down thing, because the way this mistake is phrased is no clear purpose for your channel and content. Well, I think a lot of people have a clear purpose, at least in their mind. They think it's clear of like, I want to help people have fun. Okay, well, you're all over the place with that. Yeah. Or trying to reach a certain kind of person, which there's more room for on YouTube. We talk about artificial distinctions in blogging, where if you have something that's too specific, there's no real reason that it would only serve this type of person. It doesn't work so well. There's more room for that in YouTube. But still, I think there are kind of like artificial niches that people make where they're getting specific on things that don't matter, but staying really broad on things that should be more specific, like I want to help whoever, people of this certain age and demographic have more fun, but then the videos are all over the place. It's like, well, a lot of different people can enjoy cooking, sure, but a lot of people don't like cooking and hiking and all these other 12 things you're trying to put into it. So anyways, I think the way you narrow this down is more accurate. it's not so much not having a clear purpose, but having the wrong purpose.
Mm-hmm. So how do we avoid this? I think when I look at small channels, like we're looking at little channels all the time over on the channel makers channel. When we look at small channels, I see this all the time. It's like they have a video about music, and then they have a video about cooking, and then they have a video about DIY car repair. It's like, so what is your channel? So I know for me, when I've started a few channels now, I struggle with the same thing. It's like, I want to make videos about these things. These are the things that I like. How do I get around that?
Yeah.
Any ideas or thoughts? I think I might have a couple, but I just wanted to hear if there was anything from your side where you think, okay, this is how you could kind of get around that.
Well, the first idea we've talked about is unlisting old videos. So like if you were to look at one of my channels right now, definitely has that problem. But if I were to unlist old videos, like I know I'm not going back to that. So I should just unlist those old videos. So like
a total pivot, essentially.
Yes, total pivot. And I think a lot of people just don't realize that is usually the answer. A lot of people just are going to leave their old videos up, even if they have pretty intentionally decided to change. But for the people where we see them doing, cooking, then hiking, then cooking, then whatever, dogs, then cooking, and they're going back and forth all the time, that's clearly less intentional.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I think multiple channels, if you have the energy for it, just be honest with yourself that, if you're not, it's not going to do well. It's not really serving that same channel double anyway. So you might as well start another side channel and post on different channels. If you can decide, I really want money. Okay, well then don't go off topic. If you can decide, I just really want this to be my career space and I don't care how well it does, then do whatever you want.
Okay. I love those ideas. I think you're right. A couple ideas that I had, and tell me what you think about it. So number one, again, for small creators, this probably isn't the right answer, but if you have a little bit of a larger channel, but you want to expand, collaborations. I wonder if you could try and collaborate with other people in other niches in just a very creative way. So I've seen it happen on YouTube, and sometimes it feels a little weird, but you'll have like a gaming channel collaborate with a cooking channel. It's like, well, where is that going to go? I don't know, but it usually makes for some pretty interesting content. So if you want to kind of delve into some of these other niches potentially, or of your other interests, I wonder if collaborations is a way to kind of break into that, to get exposure to an audience in those other niches. The second thing that I wonder is if you can find some sort of unifying characteristic or trait about all of the videos that you do. So like for me, what that has looked like on my channels, I like finance stuff, and I don't want to just make like finance how-to videos. I want to kind of pull all of my interests into it. So most of my videos have something to do with the financial aspect. And so, maybe it's, I want to learn how to do small engine repair. It's like, okay, how could I make a video about that on a finance channel? Well, is it the cheapest way that I could repair this? I'm going to attend a class I'm going to sneak into a class for free and then learn how to do this. Like, there are so many different ways to approach that, but just focus on the financial aspect rather than focus on the small engine repairs. Like, I'm not giving a small engine repair tutorial. I get to do the small engine repair stuff because that would be part of the video to see if I can fix it. But depending on how I frame the video, maybe it just turns into like this money saving video or the side hustle video. I don't know. So like you could do a very wide variety of things if you framed all things through like the finance, lens. That's kind of how I've approached it.
I think that's really smart. Yeah. And then you're staying true to yourself, so you're going to enjoy the content more long term than just like, well, I should make this, but I want to make this. Yeah. And you're probably going to find a more like unique tribe. There's so many people on YouTube, so you're probably going to find a group of people that likes that combination, even if it seems a little more unusual than something like finance.
Yeah, I think a creator who's done this pretty well, not in the long form space, but the short form space is Jenny Hoyos.
Oh, yeah.
She has done some very similar things finance-wise. So if any of you are interested in that, go check that out. She has a very interesting channel, very wide variety of topics, but all kind of surrounding finance. So
good
a little
example.
Bit of inspo.
Yeah, I like that. Mistake number 3. It's already too common and trivial to say that you don't format your channel and videos properly. If you're familiar with our subscribe channel review section, you know that among 10 authors in the stream, only 2 or 3 will have a proper formatting at best. Do you know what they're talking about?
I have no idea.
This is the number 1 article, number 2 article on Google. Formatting. What do they mean by formatting? I think they're talking about like production quality. So it says, if you think that videos you've been shooting on your phone without a microphone for the past 3 years will be watched with the same interest as before, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Okay, so are we going to assume that's what they're talking about?
I would say that, and then as I'm reading, I'm also thinking like along those lines, like maybe a little bit of like the storytelling, like anything to kind of level up. It feels like kind of not just staying stagnant, because like with the example of the microphone or the iPhone, it's like if you don't have a microphone, you're shooting on an iPhone, maybe that's fine for the first 6 months, but it's like eventually your audience is going to expect more. And I think the same could be said for storytelling elements or things like that.
What are the chances that ChatGPT wrote this?
Based on this paragraph, 90%.
Oh, man.
I don't know. It's just like a little bit confusing. If they are talking about production quality and those types of things, I would say yes. We've had some recent conversations about that, how, leveling up your production quality over time is a really important thing to do. Depending on the niche, that will look totally different. Maybe it is a way nicer camera. So for some niches, like it's a super, super like film camera, like a really, really nice camera. For some people, it's just like a nicer vlog camera rather than an iPhone. Sometimes it's a lav mic. Sometimes it's a, shotgun mic, something like that. But yeah, I would have to agree with the potential AI if that's what they're talking about. Let's move on.
Yeah. Mistake number 4. Another common mistake is an inconsistent approach to channel tasks.
So organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
So before starting to shoot a video, you need to decide what it will be about. Before deciding what the video will be about, you need to understand who will watch it.
We were talking with Cody, our video editor, the other day, and we were planning some very early stages of video planning, and he asked us, what's the purpose of this video? And I was like, oh, that's a really good question, Cody. I hadn't really thought about it yet. Like we were pretty deep into this. I think we were kind of scripting the video already.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, what's the purpose? Like, is there a specific call to action? Obviously the video we were making was kind of not how to, but it was educational. So obviously part of the purpose was to help people fix the problem that we were addressing. But I think sometimes it can be a little bit deeper than that. So that feels like it kind of connects right to this.
Yeah, I like how this is a really quite unique mistake. I wouldn't have expected something like this on this list. It's a good point that, if you don't understand your reasoning behind, who you're trying to reach and what the video is going to be about, then don't start scripting. Even if you have a topic, but you don't really know the purpose of the video, like you were saying, that can be a problem. As well as skipping the thumbnail and title, which that's so hard to do. Sometimes we still do that because we're just not sure. And we know that we should almost always plan the title and thumbnail ahead of time, but sometimes we just haven't quite landed on. It's almost like we don't know the topic until we've started outlining, I think.
Right.
And that's, I would argue, somewhat intentional. Like we try to know the topic more clearly, but sometimes we're just not sure. I think a lot of it is because so much of what we do is research based. So if we don't really know the cause of the problem, we might not know what the solution is. And how do you tease a solution if you don't know it yet?
Right.
If you haven't done this research yet, or, are these numbers surprisingly low or surprisingly high? We don't know yet because we haven't collected the data yet.
Yeah.
And so until we do that, it's pretty hard to figure out our exact direction. But I do think that it is easy to get ahead of yourself in so many ways on YouTube and go in the wrong order, just skip ahead or neglect to be intentional. So
I think that's a good one. Something on the thumbnails really quick.
Yeah.
One thing that I love about doing the thumbnails early on, and we've had this conversation before, is just like you can imagine the greatest thumbnail possible. And then if you start there, that can really help you craft the video. Or like if I imagine this amazing thumbnail that I think everyone would love, everyone would click, like what will it take for me to make a video that matches that thumbnail? And I love starting there because then it feels like the sky's the limit rather than after you plan the content or after you shoot the content. It's usually pretty slim. Like your options are way fewer at that point because it's all written in stone at that point, right? And so it just gives you more creative ability to plan it beforehand, plan the marketing beforehand so that you can say, okay, here's what I think the marketing could be and it would be amazing. And then plan the video to say, okay, if we plan the video this way and shoot it this way, it's all within our scope and we can still hold on to this great marketing.
Yeah.
I think it just gives you way more creative freedom. But then, like you said, some videos just don't afford for that. I think, listening to a podcast with Mark Rober on, and he was talking about how a lot of his videos, they aren't like, some of them are research, but I think he was talking about the squirrel video. He has the squirrel do all the gymnastics, course thingy. And he said the story isn't written until all the footage is shot and edited together. He said you could edit 50 different stories out of the footage. And so for him, sometimes he said the thumbnail wouldn't come together until the end just because there's 1,000 stories in the footage. I mean, he was talking about hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage. And so he had to like craft this story, and then he would match a thumbnail to it.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it shows that there are different approaches for everything, but he's still being
Very intentional.
very intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the opposite would probably be less intentional.
Yep.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many different approaches, but just be honest with yourself about what the best approach is. Don't just like default into something because you forgot or that's what's working, or try to really think through what the best way is. Okay. Mistake number 5. Waiting for everything to work on its own. I feel like that's very similar to number 1.
That does feel very similar to number 1, which was thinking YouTube is all about luck and completely random.
Yeah, so the description on this one, we have received dozens of questions like how to get subscribers. And this is despite the fact that there's a whole channel with hundreds of useful videos that answer this question. That's relatable. We thoroughly explain how to get subscribers, but some people prefer to ask in the hope of discovering some unknown secret that requires no effort. And then thousands of subscribers and tens of thousands of views will pour in. That's hilarious.
So the paragraph after that says, what do you think a millionaire would answer if you asked them, how do I become a millionaire? And then it says, if you want a knowledgeable and specific answer, learn to ask the right questions. I think that's a little bit of an analogy.
Yeah.
There. Like, for YouTube, the answer probably isn't how do I get subscribers? We know how to get subscribers. It's make videos, clickable thumbnails, good titles. Like, it's very simple. The formula is technically very simple, but there's a lot of in between there, right?
Yeah.
That you have to fill in those lines, and
basically high click-through rate,
exactly.
High retention. YouTube's going to like you.
Yep. So the question is now, how do I dive into my video production and my editing and my storytelling and my pacing and everything to work it all together to make a piece of art, essentially, that does all of those things perfectly? And I think that that's a journey. That's not something that you just like flip a switch and it's done, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's hard. There's definitely a barrier to entry there.
Practice is big.
Huge.
I don't underestimate that. Don't think that you just don't have the right skills or something, because you can learn the skills.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too hard to learn, but it takes time. It takes practice, critical thinking. I think tapping into the psychology of why something's working, why something might not be working, whatever is a little less obvious than what first meets your eye.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my thumbnail was just as good as this other one. Like, was it?
Right.
Are you sure? Like, maybe it said everything there was to say, but maybe it said too much. I don't know. Things like that. So that's it on these 5 mistakes. But then on the same article, there's 5 common mistakes that hinder your growth, and then 5 critical mistakes that can harm your channel. So this is maybe once you've already grown.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to save that for a separate episode. So we're going to have part 1 and part 2. So join us next week for 5 critical mistakes that can harm your channel.